Hi, I'm Lily Cole. So I was in Soho and in London, and there's a man called Benjamin Hart who now actually lives in Sydney, who's English, and he, I guess, saw me and came after me, and he was working with an agency called Storm in London, who I'm still with now, and that began that journey.
You said you were too cynical to think much would come of it. What did you mean by that?
I don't know if I was cynical, maybe that's the wrong word to use. I think sceptical maybe is probably is a better word for it. Not in a bad way, it's just, you know, you're 14 years old, somebody comes up to you on the street and gives you a card and says, do you want to model? And you have no idea what that means. You know, like if somebody had written out on that card, the next 10 years of your life will look like this, you know.
You wouldn't have believed it?
Yeah, exactly.
So in your wildest dreams, did you think you didn't see what was ahead of you?
Yeah, I don't think it would be possible to see it, which is always interesting, isn't it? Because then it just means like 5 years, even after I'd modelled, I couldn't probably have guessed 5 years ago how my life would look now. You know, it's taken me by surprise again. You
said your job in the industry gave you self-confidence, which you lacked when you were a model. How did you feel about, like, talk me through that a bit, because how did you feel about yourself before that? You know, were you given a hard time as a kid? I'm just thinking about young girls who may be reading this, and you know, and if you had those insecurities before, and look what you've achieved. So talk, you know, to give a little bit of background.
Sure. I was so insecure when I was younger. I had been bullied quite a bit when I was in school.
Had you? Why? Because
mostly having red hair, but I think it was also just like because I was sensitive, and you know, there are some kids in class that seem like good targets. And I, you know, you can't help when you're that age, I think, to absorb that negativity and believe in it, you know, like believe, like gets a low self. Yeah. As much as my mum would be like, you're the most beautiful girls in the world, you know, it just doesn't ring the same way as
your peers.
Yeah. And so I just remember having, and I remember before I actually got scouted, so a few people had said to me, you should model over that like last year before I was scouted. And I remember looking in the mirror and being like, there's no way I could model. Like everything I saw is wrong. You know, like I was critical of everything about myself. And it makes me quite sad actually now thinking back to that and thinking, you know what I mean? I just want to like take myself and be like, oh, don't be silly.
Let it to your 14-year-old self.
Yeah, exactly. Or actually more like probably 8-year-old self or 10-year-old self. Yeah.
So
then weirdly I got into this job where they were telling me really positive things, and scrutinising me too, but telling me predominantly very positive things. So it was kind of like going from cold water to hot water in a way, and hopefully I ended up just warm.
Are you an idealist?
Yeah, I think I'm probably quite idealistic, but I think that I recognise that I don't see everything as rose tinted. Like I recognise there's a lot of pain and darkness in this world. But I feel like we all have a choice every day of how we perceive things and the person we want to be. I think we all have the capacity to be incredibly negative and dark, or incredibly positive and light of spirit.
We want to ask you, you know, because at 18, you know, it was recorded that, you know, you had this enormous amount of wealth.
Which was all a bit fake, actually.
Well, even if it was half, I mean, it was estimated publicly,
it
was 11 million
totally fake.
pounds. Well, that's quite an astonishing thing for a young girl to.
But it was totally fake.
It was totally fake.
Yeah. I still actually have this issue that it continues to haunt me, that like this idea that I have much more money than I do.
Are you angry about that? Do you think it works against you?
Recently it has actually, interestingly. Previous to that, I just kind of ignored it.
Yeah.
When it first came up, I remember saying to my agents, like, well, that's totally wrong, shouldn't we correct that? And they were like, well, if you do, then people will ask, how much do you earn? It becomes really intrusive, and so I just let it go. But it becomes something then, by not contesting, becomes truthful.
How do you deal with those kinds of things today? You know, because everything is so with Twitter, and you know, there's so much that is put out in the public domain. and like you said, if you don't contest it, it becomes truth. How do you deal with things that are incorrect now?
It depends on what level they're incorrect, because there will often be lots of inaccuracies that I will just ignore, because if you tried to, at some point I just made a kind of peace with the fact that the image that people might perceive as of me is going to be different from the reality of me, and that's just inevitable. Well, it's just somewhat inevitable.
Is there anything that we can clear up for you?
Oh, bless you.
Why not?
Well, that £11.5 million is totally crap. It's more, I would say, actually, that people should just probably doubt a little bit more what you read, especially like tabloids. I think one lesson I would say from it is I would hope that people wouldn't judge people they don't know and they haven't met.
You described yourself as a model and an actress, and you hate the term model turned actress. Why? I found that quite curious.
That's funny. I love that these old quotes get found that I've forgotten that I've said.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't think, I actually was acting before I was modelling, interestingly.
Were
so
you?
You might call me an actress turned model turned actress.
What age were you acting?
I started when I was 6.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What did you enjoy about modelling, and what aspects don't you like?
I loved travelling. I loved the excitement of it. Like, it was like, you know, everything was just like shiny and new and colourful and fast and urgent, and like I've always been very hungry for experiences in life, and it was just suddenly like, here's a million experiences happening really quickly, you know. And I love meeting and working with really creative, different people, and that was wonderful, you know, like to be in Paris or to be here or to be in New York and constantly meeting new people and working with some of the most, you know, creative people on the planet sometimes. I still feel very grateful for that. Having these very surreal moments where you're like, you would never, if you weren't modelling, you wouldn't be in that situation. You know, you wouldn't be dangling off a castle in India wearing a giant dress. You know, you wouldn't be walking down a catwalk while like butterflies fall on you. You know, like all of these surreal moments. Like, yeah, that was quite wonderful to like be just, you know, that life becomes so surreal. And then what I disliked, it's, you know, it is quite a scrutinising industry about how you look, and whether you're hot or not, or you're fashionable or not, is always feels like
tipping point.
Yeah, it's always vulnerable. Yeah, and because I think, whilst it like helped my self-worth a lot, at the same time, that was quite a struggle. You know, is that you feel so insecure and dependent on the people, the people around you saying, oh, you know,
you're still good.
Yeah, you're great right now.
When you look in the mirror, do you see someone different than the person that you see in the photos? Talking about that.
I think so. Yeah, it's so hard to like. It's like self-analysis in a way. It's like so hard to understand your own relationship to your own image. But I think because I've seen my image in print so much, at some point I just divorced myself a little bit from the image, and it's not me. It's like, it is obviously me, but it's not really me. It's like me carrying something else, like me portraying
being someone,
yeah, or like wearing this makeup or wearing this image or wearing this. And so I started to look at it in a much more divorced from myself way, where it wasn't like, oh, don't I look great or don't I look crap.
You caused some controversy when you appeared naked in French Playboy.
I wasn't actually naked in French Playboy.
You?
I've been more naked elsewhere, yeah.
I suppose because it was Playboy as well.
It was nude, but it was because it was Playboy, yeah. When I say nude, I mean, you're always covered up with like a bunny or something.
Any regrets on that?
No, not at all.
Good. I remember we did a story in Marie Claire about, you know, Playboy being, you know, is it empowering, you know, as opposed to a lot of people going, oh, that's, you know.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting feminist dialogue, yeah. I studied art history, and when I remember one of the lecturers is a feminist surrealist lecturer, and we did a paper on, I'm trying to remember exactly, but it was like the nude in art, and is everything from Manets Olympia to kind of Titian's to nowadays. Is it incredibly misogynistic that women have so often appeared naked in imagery for men
to be able to
do
do
consume.
the image of, yeah.
Yeah, and actually was Manets Olympia a kind of critique of that, the beginning of the critique of that. And I remember it really messed with my head actually, and afterwards really made me question the Playboy, but any other, not even just Playboy, but also just all imagery I've done that's sexualized.
Yeah.
And wonder, and I still haven't got a clear necessarily opinion on it, whether it's empowering actually, because there are choices I made. You know, like I made the choices to do that, and I'm like, I'm a woman and I can create this image if I want to, and I'm in full control of being able to exert that authority. And there are countries where women can't do that, you know, they can't do that freely nowadays. Versus whether I'm actually playing into a misogynistic paradigm, you know, and I think I'm more in the former camp than the latter, but I've managed to like confuse myself over that question point.
Yeah, there's really strong arguments for
of
both
like, who
sides.
are you doing that for? Yeah,
Yeah,
like what's the intention behind it?
I suppose it's not only just who you're doing it for, but what you do with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is it that you're doing when you do it? What do you get out of it? And I suppose it's what you're getting out of it and how you feel and what the benefits or the statements are that will then determine where it sits, in which camp.
Yeah. Nick Knight actually, he's the only one who's ever done this, journalists included, I think, or at least that they've said it, that they've communicated to me, did an interview with me once, and he had looked over all the imagery of my career and the point at which I started to do like Playboy, but several other shoots I did like that. I did one with Jürgen Teller that was nude, and then I did a couple other things like that. And he saw it as like a conscious decision I might have made in my career to change my image, like to change how
people perceived you.
Yeah, and also just the images I was creating. And I think there is some truth in that, in a way. I was always in this kind of like quite dull-like architecture. And I think I just got really sick of that at some point, you know? And I was like, I don't want to just keep being this
bored.
This like doll that gets dressed up.
Where do you see that now? Where do you think?
I have less of a desire to be naked.
Yeah, you were young, and sexuality was coming into play for yourself as a woman, not as a model, but as a woman. Yeah,
it's still quite cool to be sexy sometimes. It still feels like, it's a nice.
26, I should hope so.
It's a nice power to play with occasionally, because you just suddenly realise, like even when it's not for a photograph, you know, you just wear a certain kind of dress and like get treated completely differently, and I'm like, this is like I forgot that I have this power. So occasionally it's still quite fun, but in general, I don't know. I just try and be myself most of the time, and actually most of the images I do speak to that more than anything, because like these images for G-Star are much more like me and streety than any of those images before, and I think that's probably because I'm modelling so much less now, that it's not about me like playing a doll or playing an archetypally kind of sexy woman. It's more about just like this project I'm doing, and here's the images that go with it. So it's more about me than it is about an image creation.
You're very concerned about environmental matters, aren't you? What's top of your list at the moment?
The environment is pretty top of my list. I'm concerned about lots of different social and environmental issues, and I think I'd put the environment over and above most, because I think it's so tantamount to everything. Like if we do continue to compromise our planet in the direction that we are, then I think most other social issues will be swallowed up by that, because once you haven't got a planet to live on, like things like cancer become actually, I'm not saying they're irrelevant, I know obviously they're huge issues, and especially when people are personally affected by them, but I'm just saying all the human stories and all the animal stories that are really meaningful will actually be subsumed by the fact that we actually just can't live on the planet. You know, it was a pretty big deal breaker.
What are your little favourite small indulgences? What are your little luxuries?
I love a bath. I watched a movie in bed this morning. That felt like a luxury.
That was a luxury.
Yeah. Watching a movie in the morning is definitely a luxury. Having dinners out with friends, like I do that quite a lot, and that's just, great. You're
appearing in an ad for G-Star where you stare down that gorgeous gorgeous chess champ, Magnus Carlsen. Can you play in real life? How good are you, and how was he?
I'm so good. I beat him at chess.
And I read that you did beat him.
No, I didn't.
Was that
did
rubbish?
You actually read that?
Yeah,
I
did.
I would love to pretend that wasn't rubbish. That is total rubbish. He's the #1 chess player in the world.
I know.
So if I beat him, I should be in the championships next year. No. I didn't even try and play him. I mean, we played like a few moves, and he gave me some tips, which I gratefully took.
You were looking very, very scary and kind of kick-ass in that ad.
Yeah.
Are you tough in real life?
I think I can be if called to be. Yeah.